The air in Santa Fe was thick with the aroma of roasted chilies, leather, dust, and sweat. It was 1871, and the open-air street market was a clamor of voices, Spanish, English, and native tongues tangled like the woven rugs on display. Merchants shouted over each other, children weaved through stalls with bare feet, and cowboys leaned against wooden posts, spitting tobacco and surveying the crowd. Nathaniel Beck rode in from the north, saddle-worn and sunburned, with a week's pay jangling in his pocket. A former Union soldier turned cattle hand, he came to town with two things in mind: whiskey and meat, mostly meat. The rations at his bunkhouse had grown thin, and the cook had a special talent for turning anything edible into something regrettable. He tied his horse near the well, slapped dust from his coat, and made his way into the heart of the market. "Beef," cried one vendor. "Good cuts, clean cuts, come see." Nathaniel squinted at the sun, then at the rows of tables draped with rough cloths and slabs of flesh. He moved past goat, lamb, even snake. He wasn't picky, but he drew the line somewhere, until he found a stall with thick red cuts of beef glistening in the morning sun. "How much for the rib?" he asked, tossing a silver coin into the butcher's calloused palm. The butcher grinned. "For you, 2 bits more, and I'll throw in the stew bone." Nathaniel nodded and reached for his purse, when a disturbance at the end of the stall caught his eye. A group had gathered, men in coats too fine for the heat, their faces twisted with greed or discomfort. Between them stood a woman, Apache by the look of her, dressed in a buckskin skirt and ragged blouse, hands bound loosely in front of her. "What's this?" Nathaniel muttered, already stepping closer. "Auction," a voice behind him said, "one of the cowhands from the Circle J Ranch. They're sellin' her off. War widow, they say. No kin." Nathaniel stiffened. He had seen things during the war. Men sold, families torn. And though this wasn't quite the same, it felt no different in his gut. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with deep black eyes that stared straight ahead, as if she were looking at something miles beyond all of them. Her cheek bore the faint purple bloom of a bruise, and her lips were tight, but not trembling. The bidding had already begun. $20, barked a man in a green jacket. $25. Nathaniel didn't know what came over him. He hadn't meant to step forward. He hadn't meant to speak, but suddenly he heard his own voice, louder than he expected. 30. Heads turned. The auctioneer narrowed his eyes. 30. Do I hear A pause. Silence. No one spoke. The gavel fell. Sold. To the man with the red neckerchief. Nathaniel stood frozen. A flush crept up his neck. He felt eyes on him, curious, judgmental, amused, and then he met hers. For the first time, she looked directly at him. There was no gratitude in her face. No fear, either. Only quiet defiance. A man approached him, pushing a scrap of paper into his hand. Something that passed as a bill of sale. "You'll want to take her now. She don't speak much English. Had a husband who died fightin' with the real wild blood." Nathaniel took the paper and looked again at the woman now standing by his side. "I didn't mean to buy you," he said, almost apologetically. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any accusation. The sun was beginning to dip behind the mesas when Nathaniel led his horse and the woman out of the bustling street market. The crowd's hum faded behind them, replaced by the crunch of gravel and the distant calls of crows. The woman whose name he did not know walked beside him, silent but steady, her eyes scanning the horizon as if the world around her was a fragile thing on the verge of breaking. Nathaniel glanced sideways. The bruises on her face troubled him, but he didn't dare ask about them. Instead, he adjusted the worn leather strap holding his saddlebag, trying to find something to say, some way to break the thick silence that clung to the two of them like dust. "Where you headed?" he finally asked. She shook her head, lips pressed thin. Her voice was soft when she spoke, almost hesitant. "No home." Nathaniel nodded slowly. That much was clear. The war had torn apart more than just land and treaties. It had splintered families, erased villages. He knew what it meant to have no home, though for him, it had been choice and circumstance. For her, something far darker. They reached the edge of town, where adobe houses gave way to open plains dotted with sagebrush. Nathaniel knew the way to the Circle J Ranch well enough. He'd worked there off and on for months now. It was a rough place, but it was a roof and food. "Circle J," he said, "that where you want to go?" The woman's eyes flicked toward the distant fences and corrals, but she said nothing. Nathaniel guided his horse forward, and after a few minutes, she climbed onto a second horse he had brought along. She was light and agile, as if every step was measured and deliberate. A dance with the land she'd been forced to leave behind. They rode in silence until the sky deepened to a bruised purple, and the first stars began to prick the darkening canvas above. At the ranch, Nathaniel's companions eyed the strange new arrival with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Who's this?" called out Bill, a lanky cowboy with a scar running across his cheek. "Bought her at the market," Nathaniel replied, dismounting. "Widow Apache." Bill whistled low. "Bought her, like cattle?" Nathaniel bristled. "No, not like cattle." The woman stood by the fence, hands folded, watching the men with quiet strength. She didn't meet their gazes, but the silence itself seemed to push back against their assumptions. Inside the main house, Nathaniel found an old blanket and some bread and meat from the larder. He carried it out and set it before her. She hesitated, then took the food with careful hands, eating slowly, deliberately. That night, Nathaniel couldn't sleep. His mind wrestled with 1,000 questions he didn't know how to ask. Why had she been sold? Who had done this? What was her story? The next morning, he found her sitting outside, watching the sun rise over the hills. For the first time, she spoke more than a few words. "My name is Nayeli," she said quietly. "It means I love you in my language." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "Nayeli, that's a good name." She nodded but didn't smile back. "Your husband?" Her eyes clouded. "Died in fight. Apache and soldiers. Many die." Nathaniel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The war had not just been battles and strategy. It had been blood, loss, and broken promises. Days passed. Nayeli did not speak much, but she worked alongside the ranch hands, mending fences, tending horses, and moving with the grace of someone deeply connected to the land. Nathaniel found himself watching her more often than he cared to admit, fascinated by her resilience and quiet dignity. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence near the river, a rider approached from the distance, galloping hard. Nathaniel's hand instinctively went to his pistol, eyes narrowing. The rider slowed as he neared, raising a hand in greeting. "Sheriff Matthews," the man said, dismounting. "I hear there's an Apache woman here. Thought I'd come see for myself." Nathaniel tensed. "What do you want?" The sheriff looked at Nayeli, then back at Nathaniel. "She's got a price on her head," he said flatly. "Rumors say she knows things, secrets from the war. If you're protecting her, you're in trouble." Nayeli looked at Nathaniel, her dark eyes steady. "What secrets?" Nathaniel asked. Sheriff Matthews shrugged. "That's what I'm trying to find out." As the sheriff left, Nathaniel knew their quiet life was about to change forever. The sun hung low over the Circle J Ranch, casting long shadows across the dusty ground as Nathaniel stood outside the barn. His thoughts tangled like the hay in the loft. Sheriff Matthews' words echoed in his mind. "She's got a price on her head. Secrets from the war." What could Nayeli possibly know that made her such a dangerous woman? He glanced over at Nayeli, who was tending to a mare near the fence. Her movements were calm and measured, but something in her eyes flickered with a shadow he couldn't place. "Why did they sell you?" Nathaniel asked gently, one evening as they sat around the campfire, the orange flames flickering in the dark. Nayeli hesitated, her gaze fixed on the glowing embers. Then, slowly, she began to speak in broken English. "My village burned. Soldiers came. My husband taken. I try to hide. They catch me. They sell." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but each word carried the weight of loss and betrayal. Nathaniel felt a pang of guilt and anger. How many like her had suffered in silence? "Who sold you?" he pressed. She shook her head. "Don't know. Many men. Bad men." Nathaniel clenched his jaw. The law was supposed to protect people, but here it seemed only to serve those who could pay or wield a gun. Days later, as Nathaniel worked on the fence with Bill, the cowboy's skepticism softened. Bill had seen many things in his time on the frontier, but Nayeli was unlike anyone he'd ever met. "She's tougher than she looks," Bill admitted, watching Nayeli expertly calm a wild horse. Nathaniel nodded. "She's been through hell." The quiet routine of ranch life was shattered one afternoon when a rider arrived in a cloud of dust, carrying a letter addressed to Nathaniel. The message was brief but urgent. "Nathaniel, if you want to keep the woman alive, come to the old trading post at dawn. Alone." No signature. No explanation. Nathaniel's mind raced. It was a trap. He could feel it, but he couldn't leave Nayeli defenseless. That night, as the moon carved silver paths across the landscape, Nathaniel found Nayeli sitting by the fire, sharpening a knife. "There's something waiting for me," he told her quietly. She looked up, eyes sharp. "You must go." He shook his head. "I can't do this without you." Her gaze softened. "I will stay. You come back." The dawn was cold and crisp when Nathaniel rode out alone toward the trading post. an old wooden building half swallowed by sagebrush and dust. The place had been abandoned for years, but tonight it buzzed with danger. A shadow stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered. "You shouldn't have come," the man said, voice low and menacing. Nathaniel recognized him instantly. A former Confederate officer turned outlaw, Jeremiah Cole. He was rumored to run illegal auctions and deals in stolen goods and people. "What do you want with Naomi?" Nathaniel demanded. Cole's lips curled into a cruel smile. "She knows things, Beck. Things that could ruin powerful men. The war wasn't just about bullets and blood, it was about secrets. Apache knowledge, alliances, betrayals." Nathaniel felt the weight of those words. Naomi was more than just a widow. She was a key to something much bigger. "I won't let you hurt her," Nathaniel said, hand inching toward his revolver. Cole laughed. "You're brave, but foolish." Suddenly, the night exploded into gunfire. Nathaniel dove for cover as bullets kicked up dirt around him. He managed to fire back, his years as a soldier keeping him alive. After what felt like an eternity, Cole and his men retreated into the darkness. Breathing hard, Nathaniel made his way back to the ranch, heart pounding with fear and determination. When he returned, Naomi was waiting by the gate. "You are safe," she said simply. He shook his head. "No. This is only the beginning." Their bond deepened in the days that followed. Nathaniel learned more of Naomi's past, how she had been a healer in her tribe, how her husband had been a warrior fighting to protect their land, and how the war had shattered everything. In turn, Naomi began to trust Nathaniel, sharing small stories and fragments of her world. She taught him words in her language, told him about the stars, the animals, the earth. Together, they forged a fragile hope amid the chaos. But as the sun rose over the frontier, the shadows of the past loomed larger than ever. The days blurred into a relentless cycle of work and quiet reflection at the Circle J Ranch. Nathaniel and Naomi moved through their routines, but beneath the surface, tension simmered like a brewing storm. The attack at the trading post was a stark reminder that the war's shadows were far from gone, and neither of them could ignore the growing threat creeping ever closer. One evening, as the sun bled out over the horizon, Nathaniel found Naomi sitting alone near the river, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. Her eyes, usually so guarded, were clouded with something darker, memories that refused to rest. "Tell me," Nathaniel said gently, settling beside her, "about your husband, about the war." She looked at him, hesitating. Then, as the wind carried the soft murmur of the river, she began. "My husband, Teanita, brave, strong. He fought to protect our people, but the soldiers, they came like fire, burning, killing, taking." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "The night they took him, our village surrounded. I hid with the children, praying they would survive. When dawn came, Teanita was gone, taken by the soldiers. We never heard from him again." Nathaniel swallowed hard. The war had created ghosts like hers, men and women lost to battles, betrayals, and broken promises. "Why did they sell you at the market?" he asked. She looked away. "They said I was useless without my husband, that I was wild blood. No one wanted me." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. Nathaniel clenched his fists. "That's not right. No one has the right to treat you like that." She shrugged, a faint smile touching her lips. "Maybe, but this land is not kind. Not to people like me." Their moment was broken by a shout from the ranch, Bill waving frantically. "They're here," Bill called. Nathaniel's heart dropped. Men on horseback, dust clouds rising in the distance, shadows stretching across the land. The outlaw gang, led by Jeremiah Cole, had returned. "Get inside," Nathaniel ordered, urgency sharpening his voice. Inside the house, Naomi moved swiftly, locking doors and gathering what little valuables they had. But Nathaniel knew the danger wasn't the loot, it was Naomi herself. The gang rode in, rough and wild, cutting through the quiet like a blade. Jeremiah Cole dismounted, his cruel smile colder than ever. "I told you to hand her over," he said, voice like gravel. Nathaniel stepped forward. "She's under my protection." Cole laughed. "You think a man like you can stand against us?" Gunfire erupted. Chaos exploded as Nathaniel and the ranch hands fought to defend their home. Naomi, though unarmed, moved with a fierce grace, using the shadows and the land to evade capture. In the thick of battle, Nathaniel saw Naomi wrestle one of the men to the ground, her strength surprising even him. But despite their efforts, the outlaws were relentless. They pushed Nathaniel's group back, forcing them to retreat toward the hills. As they fled, Nathaniel grabbed Nathaniel's hand. "We need to get to the canyon. It's the only place they won't follow." Naomi nodded, eyes fierce. They rode hard into the night, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. At the canyon's edge, they found a narrow cave, hidden by brush and shadows. Inside, the air was cool and still. Nayeli knelt, placing her hands on the ground. "The land remembers," she whispered. Nathaniel watched as she closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Then she spoke in her language, a low chant that filled the cave with an ancient power. He realized then that Nayeli was more than a survivor. She was a keeper of her people's spirit, a living link to a past that refused to be forgotten. "We can't stay here long," he said quietly. "They'll be looking for us." She opened her eyes, calm and steady. "We will fight, not with guns, but with what they do not understand." Nathaniel nodded, understanding dawning. The war wasn't just fought with bullets and brute force, it was fought with knowledge. With will, with the strength of roots that ran deep beneath the surface. As dawn broke over the canyon, Nathaniel and Nayeli prepared to face the coming storm together. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the cracks of the canyon walls, casting long, golden beams across the rugged landscape. Nathaniel and Nayeli sat beside a small fire, the flickering flames reflecting in their eyes. Their brief refuge had given them time to breathe, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on their shoulders. "We need help," Nathaniel said, breaking the silence. "Cole's gang won't stop until they get her." Nayeli nodded slowly. "There are others, people who don't want the war to keep burning." Nathaniel wasn't sure who she meant, but he was willing to listen. The next morning, they set out to find the nearest settlement, a small town nestled between the hills known as Pedro Blanca. The town was a patchwork of adobe buildings, trading posts, and saloons, a crossroads for settlers, native tribes, and traders alike. As they entered the dusty main street, Nathaniel could feel the eyes of the townsfolk upon them. Whispers floated through the air, an Apache woman and a soldier. Some looked with suspicion, others with curiosity. At the general store, they found a man who would become their unlikely ally, Elias Gray, a grizzled trader with a sharp eye and a reputation for fairness. "I've heard about Cole and his gang," Elias said, lighting a pipe as he studied Nia. "They're dangerous, but they're not invincible." Nathaniel explained the situation, detailing the attacks and the bounty on Nayeli's head. Elias nodded grimly. "There's a group out in the hills, a mix of settlers and native warriors, tired of the fighting. They want peace, but they're willing to fight for it. Where can we find them?" Nathaniel asked. Elias gave directions to a hidden camp, a place known only to a few. As they prepared to leave, a shadow fell across the doorway. Sheriff Matthews stepped inside, eyes narrowed. "You're stirring up trouble," he said coldly. "Cole's business is bigger than you realize. You'd do well to stay out of it." Nathaniel met his gaze steadily. "I'm not leaving Nayeli to be hunted." The sheriff sneered. "You're making enemies?" Outside, Nayeli watched quietly. Enemies and allies often wear the same faces. The journey to the hidden camp was perilous. Nathaniel and Nayeli rode through rough terrain, alert for ambushes. When they arrived, they were greeted cautiously but with a sense of hope. The camp was a mix of cultures, Apache warriors, displaced settlers, and even a few former soldiers who had grown weary of endless conflict. Among them was a tall, imposing Apache chief named Kiona, whose piercing gaze held both wisdom and sorrow. "You bring danger here," Kiona said, his voice low. "Only because the danger followed us," Nathaniel replied. Nayeli stepped forward. "I want peace. I want to protect my people." Kiona regarded her silently, then nodded. "Then you must help us fight, not just with weapons, but with knowledge." Over the coming days, Nathaniel trained with the group, learning to move silently through the brush, to read the signs of the land. Nayeli shared stories of her people's traditions, the songs that could heal and the strategies passed down through generations. The alliance was fragile but growing stronger, but news traveled fast in the frontier. One morning, scouts returned with grim faces. Cole's gang had attacked a nearby settlement, burning homes and taking prisoners. Their message was clear: surrender Nayeli or more would suffer. The camp grew tense. Kiona spoke with quiet authority. "We must act before more blood is spilled." Nathaniel looked at Nayeli. "Are you ready?" She met his gaze, fierce and unwavering. "I am." As plans were made to confront Cole's gang, Nathaniel realized that this fight was bigger than either of them. It was a fight for survival, for justice, for the right to live free. The frontier was a harsh and unforgiving place. But in their newfound alliance, there was a spark of hope, a chance to turn enemies into allies and to build a future from the ashes of the past. The dawn broke cold and gray, a low mist curling through the trees like whispered warnings. The allied camp stirred quietly. No one spoke above a murmur. The weight of the coming battle hung heavy in the air, but there was a fierce resolve burning beneath it all. Nathaniel checked his revolver for the third time, then glanced at Nayeli. She sat nearby, wrapped in a worn blanket, her face calm but her eyes sharp as a hawk's. This was no longer just a fight to protect her, it was a fight to reclaim dignity, justice, and peace. Chief Kiona gathered the warriors and settlers around the fire. "Today we face more than men," he said, voice low and steady. "We face hatred and greed, but together, we are stronger than the darkness." Nayeli stood, stepping forward. "They think they can break us with fear, but the land remembers. The spirit of my people will not be silenced." The group murmured in agreement, a rising tide of courage. They split into 3 groups, each with a clear role. Nathaniel led the front, a small band tasked with drawing Cole's men into a trap. Nayeli and the warriors would flank from the west, using knowledge of the terrain to their advantage, and Elias and others would guard the camp and tend to the wounded. Hours passed as they moved silently through the brush, tension coiling tighter with every step. Then, the first shots rang out, sharp, echoing cracks that shattered the quiet. Nathaniel's heart thundered as his group engaged the outlaws. Gunfire roared, boots pounded against the earth, and curses flew like arrows. He moved with practiced skill, firing, ducking, shouting orders. From the west, Nayeli and her warriors struck like a sudden storm. Their war cries pierced the air as they descended on Cole's men with fierce precision, cutting off escape routes and sowing confusion. Nathaniel caught sight of Cole himself, rallying his men with brutal commands. Their eyes met across the chaos, 2 men driven by different fires. The battle waged on, brutal and unforgiving. Nathaniel found himself locked in a fierce duel with one of Cole's lieutenants, sweat and blood mingling on his brow. He barely noticed when Nayeli appeared at his side, a bow in hand and arrows notched with deadly accuracy. Together, they turned the tide. But just as victory seemed within reach, a thunderous explosion shook the hillside. Cole had set a trap, igniting a cache of explosives hidden near the camp. Smoke and fire erupted, and the allied fighters scrambled to contain the damage. Amid the chaos, Nathaniel saw Nayeli shield a young child from falling debris, her face a mask of fierce determination. When the smoke cleared, the outlaws were scattered, their will broken. Cole lay wounded but alive, his reign of terror over. As the sun set behind the hills, the camp gathered around the fire once more, battered but victorious. Nathaniel looked at Nayeli, gratitude and something deeper stirring in his chest. "You saved more than your life today," he said quietly. "You saved us all." She smiled, a rare softness breaking through. "We saved each other." The frontier was still wild, still dangerous, but in that moment, among the scars and the stories, there was hope, a promise of a new beginning. The first light of morning stretched across the valley like a gentle promise. The fires from the night's battle had long since burned out, leaving behind ashes and memories, but the air felt different, lighter, as if the land itself was breathing a sigh of relief. Nathaniel stood outside the battered walls of the Circle J ranch, watching as Nayeli moved among the workers, her presence a quiet strength that seemed to steady everyone around her. The frontier was still unforgiving, still filled with hardship, but something had changed. The past's weight, while never forgotten, had begun to lift. It had been weeks since the battle. Cole and his gang were gone, captured or scattered, and the fragile alliance Nathaniel and Nayeli had forged now hummed with life and cautious optimism. The settlers and native warriors were no longer just uneasy neighbors. They were a community. Nayeli approached Nathaniel, her face illuminated by the rising sun. "The land is healing," she said softly. "And so are we." He nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "It's been a long journey." She smiled, a real smile this time, one that carried the light of hope. "And it's not over, but we face it together." Nathaniel took her hand, their fingers intertwining like the threads of 2 lives woven into one story. That day, they walked through the fields, the soft breeze carrying the scent of sage and earth. Children laughed in the distance, their voices a melody that promised the future would be different. Nathaniel thought about the day he had gone to the street market, looking for meat and instead finding Nayeli, a widowed Apache woman whose courage had changed everything. What had started as an unexpected encounter had become a shared battle, a fight for justice, and ultimately, a hope for peace. As they reached the edge of the ranch, Nathaniel looked out over the horizon, the vast landscape stretching endlessly before them. The war had left scars on this land, but it had also revealed its resilience. Nayeli squeezed his hand. "Our people have lived here for generations. We carry their stories, their strength. This is home." Nathaniel breathed in deeply, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, the rhythm of life that continued despite all odds. "Home," he echoed. "Yes, home." Together, they turned back toward the ranch, ready to build a future from the ashes of the past, a future where old wounds could begin to heal and where hope could take root. The frontier was wild and unpredictable, but with each other, Nathaniel and Nayeli knew they could face whatever came next. And as the sun climbed higher, casting its golden light over the land, a new dawn had truly begun.